Hello, true crime fans. Welcome to Debate the News True Crime live on Chatter Social. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by my fabulous co-host Adrienne Barker. Tonight we delve into the infamous case of Amanda Knox, the 2007 murder of 21-year-old British student Meredith Kercher in Perugia, Italy. An American exchange student and her Italian boyfriend were thrust into a years-long legal saga, while the victim's family sought justice across international lines. This case has everything: a brutal crime, questionable investigations, courtroom twists, and a media firestorm. A quick note before we dive in: tonight's discussion involves violent crime and murder, with details some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. Please remember, Adrienne and I are not law enforcement officers, attorneys, or forensic experts. We do our best to research each case thoroughly, but the show is recorded live with little to no editing. Any factual inaccuracies are unintentional. And of course, any individuals we discuss who haven't been convicted of a crime, including those ultimately acquitted in tonight's case, are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
I'm Adrienne Barker. This case truly reads like a courtroom thriller and also a nightmare. In November of 2007, Meredith Kercher, a bright British exchange student, found brutally murdered in the cottage she shared with Amanda Knox. What followed was an investigation that led to three young suspects from three different countries: the United States, Italy, and Joseph, say that country that, do the other one, Cote de l'Ivoire?
Cote
What?
d'Ivoire.
Ooh, I almost want you to say it again. And a roller coaster of trials and verdicts that kept the world guessing. The story of Amanda Knox's ordeal not only captivated the public, but it also sparked debates about forensic science, prosecutorial conduct, media sensationalism, and honestly, the stark differences between justice systems across the globe.
This is Debate the News True Crime. Let's dive into the timeline of events. On the morning of November 2nd, 2007, police in Perugia, Italy, discovered 21-year-old British student Meredith Kercher dead in her bedroom. Her throat was slashed. Signs of a struggle and a staged break-in immediately pointed to foul play. Meredith's American roommate, 20-year-old Amanda Knox, had returned home that morning to find a broken window, spots of blood in the bathroom, and Meredith's door locked. Alarming clues that led her to call her new boyfriend, Rafael Solicito, and then the police. Investigators quickly theorized the break-in was faked to cover up an insider's crime, and they launched a high-profile murder investigation.
Early suspicion fell on Amanda Knox and Raffaele Solicito. The pair, who had been dating for barely a week, told police they spent the night of November 1st at his apartment. But under intense questioning, guess what? Their alibis wavered. Investigators also found their behavior odd in the wake of the murder. Knox and Solicito, I know I'm saying it wrong, Solicito, were seen kissing outside the crime scene, and they were even shopping for lingerie shortly after, conduct that many deemed inappropriate. At the police station, Knox did a cartwheel in the police station hallway. That raised eyebrows about her demeanor. And rumors swirled about the tension between Meredith and Amanda, fueling theories that jealousy or roommate quarrel might have led to the crime. And the media, they seized on Knox's persona, dubbing her Foxy Knoxy. Yep. And portraying her as a femme fatale in lurid headlines. And in this frenzy, which often overshadowed the victim, Knox was painted as a prime suspect long before any trial.
On November 6, 2007, after a marathon overnight interrogation, Amanda Knox abruptly accused someone else of the murder. She told police that her employer, bar owner Patrick Labumba, was the killer. Knox later insisted this claim was pressured and imagined under duress, but it was enough for authorities to act. That day, police arrested Knox, Solicito, and Patrick Lumumba, briefly declaring the case solved.
Patrick Lumumba. I just like to say that last name, so I'm going to say it one more time. Patrick Lumumba, however, was entirely innocent and he had a rock solid alibi. Lumumba, I love it, Lumumba. He was working at his crowded bar the night of the murder, confirmed by many witnesses. Within 2 weeks, he was released from jail and all suspicions of him was dropped. And Knox immediately recanted her accusation against Lumumba, explaining that she was confused and frightened by the interrogation tactics. Well, while this false accusation later led to a slander charge against Knox, it also reinforced the question. If Lumumba wasn't involved, then who was the third person hinted at the evidence, Joseph?
Forensic clues soon provided an answer. Investigators discovered a bloody fingerprint and other DNA traces at the crime scene that did not belong to Meredith Knox or Solicito. These pointed to 20-year-old Rudy Gede, an acquaintance from the neighborhood who had fled Italy right after the murder. An international manhunt led to Gede's arrest, and he was brought back to Italy in handcuffs. With Gede in custody, a new suspect entered the story.
Rudy Gede admitted he was at the cottage the night Meredith was killed, but he claimed he didn't do it. He told authorities that while he was in the bathroom, an unknown intruder attacked Meredith and that he struggled with this mystery assailant before fleeing. Investigators did not believe Guaido's story. Instead, prosecutors developed a theory that Rudy, Knox, and Solicito had all participated in Meredith's murder together. They hypothesized that the trio tried to involve Meredith in a sexual misadventure that turned violent when she resisted. And this sensational notion of a sex game gone wrong dominated the early headlines. Do you remember that? Though concrete evidence of a coordinated attack was definitely lacking.
Meanwhile, police touted two key pieces of physical evidence linking Knox and Solicito to the crime. A large kitchen knife taken from Solicito's apartment was reported to have a minute trace of Meredith's DNA on the blade and Knox's DNA on the handle. Prosecutors labeled it the possible murder weapon. And later, a metal clasp from Meredith's bra, collected weeks after the murder, appeared to carry Rafael Solicito's DNA, allegedly placing him at the scene. These forensic findings bolstered the prosecution's case at the time. However, defense experts immediately raised questions about their reliability.
In a separate fast track trial in October of 2008, Rudy Gueda was convicted of Meredith's murder and sexual assault and sentenced to 30 years in prison, which was later reduced on appeal to 16 years. The judge's ruling implied that Rudy had not acted alone, paving the way for Amanda Knox and Rafael Solicito to face their own trial for murder.
Knox and Solicito's joint trial began in early 2009 and drew global attention. Prosecutors portrayed Knox as a resentful instigator and argued that she, Solicito, and Gede together assaulted Meredith in a drug-fueled attack. The defense countered that there was zero reliable evidence placing Knox or Solicito in Meredith's bedroom during the crime. They also attacked the DNA evidence on the knife and bra clasp as shoddy and inconclusive. After nearly a year of testimony, the verdict came on December 4th, 2009. Both Knox and Solicito were found guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 26 years in prison, including an extra year for the false Lumumba accusation, and he received 25 years. The convictions were hailed by many in Italy and Britain who felt justice was served, but in the United States, a vocal contingent decried the verdicts as miscarriages of justice built on flimsy evidence. Knox's family immediately appealed the verdict.
The case took a dramatic turn during the 2011 appeal. The appeals court appointed independent forensic experts to review the key DNA evidence, and their findings dismantled the prosecution's case. They concluded that the trace of Meredith's DNA on the kitchen knife was so low that it was unreliable and that no blood was on the blade anyway. And they also found that the bra clasps DNA was likely contaminated and scientifically unsound as proof of Solicito's guilt. So without those evidence pillars, the prosecution's theory fell apart. And October 3rd, 2011, Amanda Knox and Rafael Solicito were acquitted of murder and they were freed. And Knox, after 4 years behind bars, flew home to Seattle, and Solicito returned to his family in Italy. And the acquittal was celebrated by those who had doubted the case against them, even as Meredith's family and others in Italy were left stunned and upset.
But the legal saga was not over. In March 2013, Italy's Supreme Court overturned the 2011 acquittals, citing procedural issues and what it saw as overlooked evidence, and they ordered a new trial. So, in 2014, Knox and Solicito were tried again in Florence. Knox remained in the US and did not return for the proceedings. In January 2014, that court reinstated the guilty verdicts, once more convicting Knox and Solicito of Meredith's murder. This time, Knox's sentence was set at 28 and a half years, and Solicito's remained at 25 years. Solicito, present in court, had his passport seized, while Knox, back in Seattle, again faced the possibility of an extradition request. This flip-flop rekindled international debate. Was justice finally being done, or was this another grave error?
The final word came on March 27th of 2015. On that day, the Court of Cassation definitively annulled the convictions of Amanda Knox and Rafael Solicito, ending the 8-year ordeal. Italy's highest court declaring that there was insufficient evidence to convict them and no possibility of another retrial. And in a strongly worded statement, the court criticized the investigation for glaring errors and a lack of solid proof. Knox and Solicito were now free, clear of the murder charges. Their nightmare was over. Ultimately, the only person to remain convicted in the case was Rudy Gueda, who served the bulk of his 16-year sentence and was released on parole after about 13 years. The Amanda Knox case, or more appropriately, we should call it the Meredith Kercher case, became one of the most famous criminal cases of the 21st century. Ooh, it exposed deep flaws in how evidence can be mishandled and how media sensationalism can warp a case.
Absolutely, Adrian. And while the core legal battle ended in 2015 with Knox's acquittal, the story continues to evolve culturally and personally. While the murder charges were definitively overturned, Italy's highest court upheld Knox's slander conviction in late 2024. That conviction stemmed from her false accusation towards Patrick Lumumba and remains unresolved. Knox expressed feeling, quote, numb following that ruling. In her memoir, Free, published in 2025, Knox detailed traumatic experience during her imprisonment, including alleged misconduct by prison staff and her journey towards healing and activism. On August 20th, 2025, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox premiered on Hulu, with Knox serving as an executive producer. The 8-episode drama stars Grace Van Patten and offers a largely factual, dramatized retelling of Knox's wrongful conviction and the media-driven elements of the case. Amanda Knox is now a proud mother of 2 and remains active publicly, focusing on her family life while continuing her work in wrongful conviction advocacy.
So I want to let everyone know we are live on Chatter Social. Chatter Social, download it right now on your app store. You'll see it's got little bubbles and it says Chatter Social. We've got a nice full house tonight. Mariana, Debbie, Dora Maria, the list goes on, Nula, Real. So thank you all for being here. So my question to you, or Joseph and I, our question to you is, do you think the intense press scrutiny and the Foxy Noxy headlines influence public perception or even the judicial process before all the facts were in? Joseph, I want to hear from you first, and then we'll listen to Nula and whoever else would like to speak up.
Yeah, Adrian, the media sensationalism in this case was some wild work, specifically the British press. They really painted Amanda Knox as this promiscuous, crazy American who, essentially was guilty. They really didn't give her the benefit of the doubt. And there was a lot of, I would say, like National Enquirer style publications that really fixated on this case. So I definitely think that influenced it. But let's go to Nuala and then Debbie.
Well, yeah, from a journalistic point of view, it was a hugely sensational case. And so it's going to bring sensationalist headlines, especially in, as you say, Joseph, tabloid newspapers. So that's something that happens. Not in all newspapers. I'm sure there were other newspapers whose headlines were less sensational. I really didn't like the journalist, the British journalist's attitude. Even when he was being interviewed, he seemed far more interested in how many bylines he got, how many front pages he got. He wasn't talking about the case. He was just talking about, oh, isn't it great that I've never had so many front pages in my life? But that's just an individual. As far as the news coverage, it theoretically isn't supposed to affect the jury, so it shouldn't affect the trial because that should be based on evidence. And I must say, I remember it at the time, and I thought, and I still think, if I'm allowed my opinion, what I mean by that is I'm not stating anything as fact, but I was convinced that they were involved. Um, the way the court's judgment came down was not saying that they were innocent, but they were saying there was not enough evidence to prove that they were guilty. That's a different thing entirely than saying they were innocent.
Good point. Wow, you may recognize Nuala's accent. So, Nuala, where were you living during this time?
Uh, I was back in Scotland. Yeah, I was in Scotland at the time.
Was it big news in Scotland?
Huge news in the UK, obviously. Yeah.
Well, this is Debbie. Yeah, so I think as far as the case went, the media basically tried her without her even getting to trial. And they brought a lot of what her personal stuff was in and, what she was doing, which I really don't think should have played a role in any of the opinion of her, but I also think that, being that there was the language barrier, I think that that hurt a lot too, because if that's not your native language, even with translators, if you're not completely fluent in the language, there can be some mix-ups and some misunderstandings. However, I too am with Nuala. I from the beginning have thought that she had some kind of involvement. I don't think she is the one that actually did it. However, I do think that she knows more than what she's led on to, and she's now trying to claim that she was completely innocent, but I still think that she was involved.
To answer the question about the media and how they portray her, that's the media's job, right? Is to make everything sensational. I do believe this she gave some things for the media to grab and make it bigger. She gave a lot of materials for them to do that. For example, when the police went to the house and just have found her on the floor full of blood. She was outside with her boyfriend and they were like kissing, like nothing is going on. That felt very sketchy to me. And there was a photographer right there just taking a picture. And of course, that went all over the media. And everyone was talking about how that was so inappropriate, right? And in my opinion, that was inappropriate.
Thank you, Mariana. I do want to go back to something that Debbie had said because Debbie had brought up the language barrier, right, Debbie? And that's such an interesting point to me. And I just want to kind of share a little cause and effect. So she arrives in Italy in 2007. What does she have? Very limited Italian, right? She has to rely on others to translate. So that is actually making her very vulnerable in this crisis, right? The interrogations for Amanda lasted long hours, right? Long into the night, no lawyer, no certified translator. She doesn't always understand the questions. And so she gave confused and inconsistent answers. I can understand that too. So she was pressured to sign a statement in Italian that she didn't fully understand. And that statement made it look like she accused her boss, Patrick Lumumba, of the murder. He was jailed for weeks before being cleared. And that actually made Amanda look dishonest. The Italian press reported her diary entries and casual American slang, but they mistranslated them into Italian. So her words sounded odd. They sounded incriminating. Her weird behavior, like doing the cartwheel in the police station, you hear that, you're like, that's so cold. That's heartless. But what if it was nervous energy, right? Like, what if that's all it was? I may not think that people are looking me as the killer because if I didn't do it, I probably wouldn't think that. So I think that her lack of speaking the language and that language barrier definitely was a cause and effect for her and did not help her at all.
Yeah, so Adrian, here's the thing. You think about if you're just playing the game of telephone and it's in English, by the time you get to the last person, it's already gone through how many people and the message is completely different. Well, in this situation, not only is she trying to talk, but she's trying to speak in a different language and without the right people there to translate. And that doesn't even mean that they would have translated it right. Now, that being said, though, I'm going to tell you one thing. My name is not going to be signed on any piece of paper if I do not know what that says. So I think that that was her big mistake was she should have never signed anything without knowing what she was signing. So yeah, I think that there was a lot, and when you're in a different country and it's different language, there's a lot to be said. But I'm not signing anything that I don't know what it says.
The vibe I got, and I could be wrong, but the vibe I got from her is that she was kind of awkward, a little bit weird. So was her boyfriend. They were a little nerdy. And I think that that awkwardness and weirdness came across as guilt. I think it's understandable that in a situation like that, someone might not act how you would expect them to. And I know they smoked weed, her and her boyfriend, a lot. Like, who knows? Maybe they were high when they came home that day and when they were talking to the police. And I think that I agree with you, Debbie. I would never sign my name to a document. But just based on how young she was and how naive and kind of awkward she was, I can see someone after an overnight interrogation in a foreign country where there's a language barrier just kind of snap or break or just say, okay, I'm going to sign this and say and do things that maybe are irrational because you're sleep deprived and your roommate had her throat slashed. That's a very traumatic situation in and of itself.
No, you're right about that. Good points, Joseph.
So this is Mariana, by the way. I agree with you a little bit, Joseph, on the fact that she was young. I don't know about being awkward though. I think she was very outgoing, a little bit mature for her age, actually. If you watch her and how she behaved at that age with her family, even her dad said, when her mom was a little worried when all this happened. Her dad was like, "Oh, she can handle it. She's a big girl. She knows how to handle herself and stuff like that." And when you go to a different country and your family are okay with you traveling abroad, is because they believe that you can handle yourself. So I'm not sure that I 100% believe all of her awkwardness and innocence. I think she reminds me in the car wheel situation, Adrian. She reminds me of the area girl who killed her boyfriend, the case that we did.
Oh, Joe.
Yeah, Jody. She reminded me of that when she was alone and she was about to do a cartwheel, just like Jody. She was doing a handstand. And I was like, wait a minute. That's the last thing I want to do. I will be very concerned. And then the last thing I want to do is to do a headstand or a cartwheel when I'm stressed out. So no, I don't give her that benefit of the doubt.
Interesting. All right, I see Dora Maria.
Oh my goodness. I just want to say I have a lot of thoughts because watching that documentary earlier today, I I was watching this case when this happened actually years ago. And all I kept saying to myself is, how can these people just blindly put people in jail. The 4 people that ended up in jail, they were just thrown in jail. It was just like, "It's you, boom, in jail." It just felt like they needed to have someone in jail to say that they did it, and it just a few things came to mind. One, in Spanish, you say to someone, "Ahorita," depending on what country they're from, that either means right now or it could mean later, right? So the same thing can happen in other languages. When she sent the text to her boss, which was evidence, but they misconstrued it and they kept forcing words on her. And words matter, words are powerful. And being a kid, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how mature you are. When trauma hits, when a situation like that hits, you're in shock because remember, she went to her place and she didn't realize what was going on in her place. She just felt uncomfortable because when she got out of the shower and she saw everything in the bathroom the way it was, she was scared. Like, was somebody in the apartment with her? Like, her nerves were already unraveled. And they tried to open the door, but she never saw the door open. Right? So they're acting as if she was seeing the murder scene. And there was just a lot of things that were like put in her face a lot. The detective, old school Catholic, very judgy, he had already made up his mind that this was a white trash woman from America. All Americans are whores. Like all of the verbiage that was being said by these police and these detectives at the place were being picked up by all of the media. Like, even when he was walking saying, "Oh, everyone thanked me," it was like, "Oh, I'm doing this for my country." It was like almost like pomp and circumstance. And he was not a good detective. A detective doesn't do it for that. A detective does it for justice. They do it for the truth. And he never said that. He literally was just saying, "I'm doing this for my country," but it wasn't. And when you're a detective and like Sherlock Holmes, I mean, a lot of those shows like Perry Mason, all of them were like justice prevails, but he never said that. I was like, this detective already made his mind up as to who was guilty and who wasn't according to who he wanted. And he was going to look for evidence and stick it together no matter what. And even when I saw the video of the crime scene, I'm like, why is it a free for all in there? Like, I mean, I watch enough SUV to know, like, you don't just walk into a crime scene. It was like a free for all. Everyone and their mother was walking in there. I was just like, what in the world is going on? Like, how do they do police work over here? And again, I just felt it was really crazy. And then there were levels, right? Like she got detained, she was held in prison. Like there was no like, let me see where this girl is at. And again, she was very honest. She was like, we were doing pot, we were having sex. Like she was on a high from sex and pot. She wasn't thinking straight. And then they get to the apartment. She starts seeing these weird things. She's disheveled. She calls this guy over, and they're both like a little stunned because they're young people and they're nerdy. So, you can't, everyone deals with things differently. Every single person reacts to trauma differently. And if we start, like, we're being just as crazy as those reporters that were there from Europe, from England, they just wanted to have the scoop first. Who cares if it was true or not? They just wanted to be the first to the press, the first to say whatever. If anyone would have come by and said, "Oh, she was baking apple pie," that would have also have been in the news, but that wasn't sensational enough. So when that guy Rudy got arrested, nobody cared. Meanwhile, he's probably the one that knows most of the details of who was there because he was there. And I'm surprised that they didn't circle back and get more information from that guy because the real killers are out there and they can probably repeat it again. I wonder if there were other killings that they could have tied to the real killers because this guy didn't say anything and it was clear that he wasn't there alone. But instead, they focused all of their energy on whoever the detective wanted to pin it on. So I found that rather disturbing. And the fact that they felt free to just hit her upside her head, to torment her in jail, things like that. Like I just have to look at that. And language and words are powerful. The fact that they kept bringing up Patrick, I would have said, okay, I agree. I agree with everything you're saying. Like, just stop tormenting me. That to me is brutality, and that's like imposing that overdue duress of having to interrogate her for that long. Imagine you going through all that. Would you be sane being a naive person that has never gone through that, not having a malicious bone in her body? I mean, she was having the best sex of her life, apparently. She wasn't thinking about anything else. So, here she is. She was taken off of that high in a minute, and she didn't even know how to act. She even in the video, she looked awkward, right? Like she didn't even know like what the hell was going on. She was stunned, she was in shock. So I believe she's innocent. I just think she got caught up in trying to appease the police officers so they would leave her alone, not realizing what she was just basically rolling in deeper shit every time she spoke up, because no matter what she did, she was getting in deeper. That's and I'll land there.
So Dora Maria, I like everything you were saying makes so much sense to me because I don't know if my mind would actually tell me what I'm seeing. I know how I am, especially at that age. I would have a hard time. Like it would take me a long time to process because I think that happens because our brain tries to protect us so that you don't go into the media's shock.
I believe Meredith Kercher was killed by somebody she knew. Why do I say that? And let's just say if I stab somebody and I tell somebody that I stabbed somebody, that person is now guilty of the murder. Once you know about him, now I don't know Italian law, but that's the way it works in the United States. I was checking into my hotel, so I might have missed these two key facts. But two things always bothered me about this case. The bedroom door was locked. So the person who killed her left and locked the bedroom door. Find that a little bit odd. But what I find even more odd is that someone put a quilt over her body. That shows remorse. If I'm just a guy burglarizing, if this is a home invasion gone bad or a rape that gone bad, I stab you. I don't really have too much remorse. I'm not putting a blanket over you. So something about those two facts, and then when you leave, you lock the door. For what reason? You think about locking the door? Like there must have been a reason. You stab somebody. You know how hard it is to put a knife into a chicken? You put a knife into someone's throat, you cut their throat. You know how much blood there is? I remember reading about it. It was a grisly scene. So, it was what I don't remember reading that anything was stolen out of the apartment. So this was a crime. This was somebody who knew this person. And I agree with Mariana. I think that Amanda Knox knows more, but I don't think she put the knife into her. That to me would take too much strength, and I just don't see it. So the one fact is the blanket over it shows remorse, and that's the one thing that always bothered me about this case. I'm done.
Good point, Andy, too, about just the strength it takes to put a knife in you. Excellent points.
Comment for Andy, like, you don't think it's possible that the person that got caught in that was probably caught in the middle of him killing her, didn't have time, or was trying to hide it and threw a quilt over her, thinking it was the roommate coming back. Maybe it was the robber, the Rudy guy, I don't know. Like, maybe they both ran out of there or something, because he who knows what happened? Maybe they were both in on it, or maybe the burglar. I don't know. I just know that there had to be more than one person, because it was just too chaotic in there for just one person to do that. And if these were young people, right? If these burglars were young people also, they could have also have been. I mean, it's an adrenaline rush, right? When you do something that you're not supposed to be doing. And if I'm going by that as normal behavior, then having killed somebody, you don't think they would have acted irrationally, like covering her body or something like that, and locking the door?
No.
Interesting.
No, it's a sign of remorse. You kill somebody, you have no empathy. You just killed somebody. You just slit their throat.
Well, maybe they didn't
You're
mean.
trying to hide a body. You can't hide all that blood by putting a quilt over somebody. I mean, you're hiding the body because you feel remorse. That's what. Again, it's always my opinion, right? That's my opinion. You don't cover somebody unless you feel, oh my God, what did I just do? You're covering somebody because you think you're going to hide this crime scene? I mean, really? I mean, what's the logic in that? Believe me, you get cut like that, you are bleeding profusely, you know what I mean? And the blood, you can't probably, you would have to cover the whole room, that's how much blood there was. I just imagining it, okay. But I respect your opinion, of course.
I get what everyone's saying. If there hadn't been another suspect involved who admitted to being in the cottage at the time of the murder, I would probably be looking a lot harder at Amanda Knox and her boyfriend. But this guy, Rudy Gede, he admitted to being in the cottage at the time of the murder. He admitted to touching the victim. He concocted this story that she invited him in, and then at some point he walked into the bathroom, used the bathroom, and when he came back out, there was another intruder who killed Meredith and then fled. And then he has this whole story about him holding Meredith as she's bleeding, and then he fled the country the next day. So to me, I mean, it seems pretty obvious who the killer was.
Joseph, I agree with you. Rudy spent the 13 years in prison and he never said, I didn't do it. Do you have any more information on his attorney, what they said, or did they not argue?
So at first, there was an informant who contacted him because he had fled the country, and I guess Italian authorities couldn't get to him. So one of his friends acted as an informant and got him on some type of like a Skype call. And in that Skype call, this is before he's arrested, he says that he was there. This man came in and killed her, and he ran away because he was scared. In that recorded Skype video, he says Amanda Knox was not there. She's not involved at all. He said that clearly. Later, once he got arrested and charged, he changed his story. And all of a sudden, he said Amanda Knox and her boyfriend were there and tried to rope them into the narrative.
Meredith's family, do they feel that they got justice? Does Meredith's family believe that Rudy is the killer and, they feel like justice was served?
During the trial, I know that they said that they felt satisfied after Amanda was originally convicted, but go ahead, Mario.
When Amanda was released completely, they felt betrayed. They still think that Amanda is involved. So they're not completely satisfied. No. I wanted to touch, if I can go into this, the fact that Amanda said she saw that somebody had broken into their house, that the window was broken, and she saw blood in the sink, and she decided to go take a shower. That's pretty odd to me. I'm like, if I see something like that in my place, I'm gonna be like, what the heck is going on? Do you think I'm gonna get in the shower? I will be freaking scared to get in the shower, not knowing someone is gonna come through the damn window. There is blood everywhere in the sink, and then she saw more when she got out of the shower. But that right there is very weird to me. And then she decided to call her boyfriend and all that. It's just like too calm. If I see something like that, I'm gonna immediately call the police. Do something. Somebody has broken into my house. Hello? I'm not gonna jump in the shower. That's very weird.
Nula. Headline read, Amanda showered in a bloody bathroom, ignoring the evidence of a violent crime. But, Aunt Mariana, what if the reality was that it wasn't a bathroom drenched in blood like the media said? What if it was just tiny blood spots and smears that only looked sinister once the crime was discovered? But if I had a roommate and I was 20 and she was 21 and there was just little tiny, tiny drops of blood, I probably would think that's just like my daughter, that she shaved and nicked her leg. And there's a lot of blood that comes from that because that actually does happen with my daughter who's 19. She
What
just
about the
nicked
broken
herself.
window? What about the broken window? Would you get in the shower if your window is broken and like you see somebody broke into your house? You're gonna get in the shower? No. I'm sorry, but no, no.
No, I probably, but I don't know if I would notice it too. I don't know where the window is. So unless I saw a picture, I don't know if I would notice it.
Well, I was thinking that as well. The same as Mariana. I mean, At first, I thought if she spent the night at her boyfriend, I would imagine she would have got up and showered at her boyfriend's before she went home. But also this thing about covering up. Well, I don't believe Amanda actually committed the crime. But if she was there and was high on something and didn't prevent it, then I can imagine, her actually just throwing anything over it because it's not a nice thing to look at, to compute that you actually might have been part of that, and then locking the door and then going to the shower to clean herself. If I saw blood in the sink or in that, at the very least, I would go and knock on my roommate's door and say, "You okay? Have you hurt yourself?" But no, she locked the door. If she did, right, and she's saying that's what they imagine, that's what they're saying. If she'd locked the door, I would say that's perfectly logical because I'm gonna go and have a shower and clean anything of me that's incriminating, and I don't want anyone coming in and going into the the murdered woman's room. So I can get the logic of that, throwing a even remorse for what has happened, throwing a cover over it, locking the door because I'm gonna go and get a shower now to clean myself of any stains myself. And and also, yeah, exactly that. I don't have to worry about the broken window because I know that it wasn't a burglar. So I can go in the shower now and then make up excuses for why I didn't notice uh, or pay attention to the blood before that. So I absolutely, I'm not buying any of that actually.
I'm having a hard time with this because I believe that she's young. She's 20. Like that is so young. And maybe because I have a daughter that age, with everything happening, you guys are tough. Wow. Because honestly, I can understand. Like, first of all, she's like got to deal with all of this. It's happening quickly. Her mind's got to go through it. But I'm just surprised how much you guys really put like you almost talk about her like she is a grown adult that should know better, and I just wanna stand up for the 20-year-olds that still are not. They're not grown up still. We know the brain is not fully developed until 25. Just the communication, imagine being there, and you don't even know what they're really saying to you, and you can't get your parents. You're not talking to your mom and dad, like, that is crazy. Do we know how long it took for Amanda to actually be able to speak to her parents after this all happened? Okay, so November 2nd, that's when Meredith was killed. November 2nd through 5th, Amanda's repeatedly called in for witness questioning, but the tone shifted towards suspicion very quickly. And then November 6th, they were both arrested. Now, her parents, Kurt Knox and Etta Mellis, they flew to Italy. She was in custody. She couldn't pick up a phone and just call them. So they saw her for the first time on November 10th, 8 days after the murder and 4 days after her arrest. Amanda described that first meeting as devastating. Her parents were shocked by how confused and exhausted she looked, and Amanda definitely did break down. Okay, so it was so harsh because no lawyer, no immediate parental contact, no proper interpreter. Basically, a 20-year-old stuck in a foreign country, police questioning her Italian while her family couldn't reach her until days later. Mariana and Nula. I I'm not seeing the empathy that I normally see, and I'm wondering why.
Because it is hard for me to be so honest with this and be so hard. Adrian, I dig deeper into this case, not just one documentary, two documentaries. I dig deeper into this case, and from both sides, from Amanda's side, from a ton of other sides. Looking at all the things that happen, everything that I watch and that I see, that I read, that I heard, it just brought me to the conclusion that Amanda is not 100% clean in this case. And that is my honest opinion. I can't deviate from that. Listen, we get to decide who our president is at the age of 18, right? So we're supposed to be adults at 18. Yeah, our brain is not completely developed until we say 25, but I tell you what, at 20, I was pretty mature. And so I'm not giving her a pass on this one because I don't believe that you that innocent at the age of 20. And if you are able to travel abroad to another country at that age and live by yourself, you are able to make some decisions. And yeah, it's because your family trusts you. They know that you are mature enough to handle yourself, and that you know what you're doing. So I'm sorry, but that's just my position on this one. I may sound too hard on her, but that's how I feel. That's my position on this one. I know you know that I'm very kind and I lean over where justice is supposed to be, but no, they got it wrong on this one.
Okay, I love you, Mariana, so I could deal with this. But I just want to say one more thing. So, one of the things that I don't actually share with you guys, what I did, I stopped in 2022 when I took my 5-month road trip with Alana, is that I actually was an area rep for a few years for the International Student Exchange. It was not college, but it was high school. And I will tell you that these exchange students, they came over, they were immature. I think of the girl that came over from Brazil that actually the things that she thought that she could do and her lying won her she actually got kicked out of the program. And so I don't think just because you get accepted into an exchange student now, granted, I'm telling you, international student exchange, who I worked for, was only high school, but these are just still kids. And, parents paid, and yes, they're given, rules and all of that. And obviously, but here, even how they were housed together. So you had two that spoke Italy, you had Meredith, and then you had Amanda. So you definitely had the cultures clashing. And I think that makes a difference. And after Nuala speaks, I just want to share a quick another uh, story of where the translation became an issue. And I just want you guys to understand how serious that is, because if I had to tie this up with a true crime bow, it would be the bow of translation. Nula Newsy, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, like at 20, I was pretty savvy, right? When we look at 20-year-olds now with the power of all our wonderful wisdom, we see that they're kids in our eyes. But at 20, we're pretty savvy. But apart from that, there have been lots of utterly brutal tortures and murders committed by people younger than that, deliberately. And you can't use naivety as an argument for why they shouldn't be tried properly. I also get that, police are trained psychologically, pretty much to psychologically torture people into. If you've been through it all yourself, you could be persuaded that you've killed your own baby, even though you don't have one, right? I mean, they're good at that. The way the police went about it is really bad. I think if they had gone about it more professionally, they would have found better evidence, or they wouldn't have screwed up what they had. But yeah, there have been horrific murders committed by people younger than that. That doesn't mean we can say, oh, they were innocent, or I don't think they did it because how can a 14-year-old do that? Yeah, they do. They have.
Thank you, Nula. I see Joseph's hand up. Joseph, argue with Nula. I want to hear a debate.
No, I think Nuala and Mariana bring up great points. Before we close, I just want to put on the record my theory. This is how I understand this case to have likely happened. I think that this murder occurred. They discovered the body. I think the Italian authorities are seeing a British citizen dead of clearly of a murder, and they're freaking out because they have to now answer to Britain and they don't have any suspects. So I think they initially focused on, at the time, probably the two most likely suspects, Amanda Knox and her boyfriend. And then Rudy Gede entered the picture. And by that point, they had already railroaded Amanda Knox. The press had already picked it up. So instead of saying, oh, sorry, we messed up, clearly this guy is the most likely suspect, they tried to concoct this narrative that the three of them did it together. And to me, I just find that too hard to believe. So I think that in my mind, is the way the police mishandled this and why they kind of dragged this out for so long. I don't think they wanted to admit that they jumped to conclusions in the beginning.
I definitely agree with you on that. Nuala, agree with Joseph?
I still stick with the thing that they weren't acquitted or pardoned or found guilty, found innocent. All that happened was that the High Court in Italy, whatever it's called, had to come to the conclusion that there wasn't the there wasn't enough evidence, and the prosecution didn't prosecute it well enough to prove that they were involved in murder. But they didn't say they were proven innocent.
Yeah, and that is an important distinction. They simply said that that DNA evidence that was used did not reach a high enough bar to definitively convict them.
And the whole bra thing, the bra claps, really? I mean, like, that just didn't make sense to me. Do I have like 4 minutes to share a story, Joseph?
Adrian, of course you do.
Okay, so this story takes place out of California. Ajay Dev, DEV, was sentenced to 378 years in prison in 2009 after his adopted daughter accused him of repeated sexual assault. But his conviction relied heavily on her own translation of a Nepali phone call that later proved inaccurate. Now, the crazy part about this, I think this is so important, is the accuser, his like niece, she translated a key phone call from Nepali to English, and her version made it look like he confessed. So that prosecutor allowed the victim to actually record a conversation in Nepali, and then they didn't get an outside translator. They let her translate it. So years, did you hear how many years I said, right, that he got? Years later, a certified translator reviewed the actual audio and found that the confessions simply weren't there. That mistranslation became the core evidence that convicted him, and they have amended the case. So it's really interesting right now what's happening with Ajay, because look what I mean, it's crazy. So when I think of the translation and know what happened with Ajay Dev, who's a friend of the family, I'm like, oh yeah, there's just too many examples of, I'm not going to say corruption, but just things being done wrong. Joseph, do we have like a couple minutes just to talk about the way the prosecution and tabloids, they really did scrutinize her, to this poor 20-year-old, her personality, her love life, her writings, pictures of her. The poor thing had to go through and I did the internet and read all the. I mean, like, I feel like she just didn't have any place to turn. So, what's your thoughts on how a suspect's character, this young woman, how that it gets put on trial in the media?
Yeah, so I think that, look, you're accusing someone of brutally slashing their roommate's throat in the press. In my opinion, there was not enough evidence at the time, and there's still not enough evidence now to even say that she probably did this in the press. So that's my take.
What a case. I mean, the tension and the cultural contrast between the US, the Italy, and the UK, really crazy that we got to see how different countries perceive the justice and fairness. So, Joseph, we'll give one more chance to see if anyone has anything that they would like to add?
Yeah, Ezra, I think you mentioned how the press were talking about her life and for her they were talking about her social media and all that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Is that what you mentioned? Okay.
Yes.
So my opinion on that is you are responsible for what you are, right? And who you are and what you put out there in the world. If especially if you put it on social media. So if he is on social media, it's for everyone to see. If the press is exposing it more, you can really blame them because you already did. You already put it on social media. And that's who you are and that's how you behave. So it is your responsibility. And you are over 18 years old. So I'm not blaming the media for that. I'm blaming myself. If that was me, I would blame myself for behaving that way and putting that out on social media. That's what's called social media. So everyone can see it. Period.
I hear you. I hear you. I understand.
Absolutely, Mariana. I just felt like it seemed like some of the press outlets were a little bit irresponsible with the way they portrayed some of those images. In the documentary, a journalist basically admitted they went to her MySpace page and the boyfriend's MySpace page and found pictures of them in Halloween costumes and then put those images of them like holding a fake gun or holding a meat cleaver and kind of weaved that into this murder accusation storytelling, which I get that that is sensational and it's great material for a story. But like, it was Halloween. Like, if you took any pictures of any of us from Halloween over the years and we got accused of a crime, I'm sure you could find us dressed crazy, looking insane, and try to make that out to be something that it's not. So I think that they went a little bit too far with that kind of stuff.
And just to say, Amanda, yeah, everything you said, playing guitar, kissing her friends, like all those pictures. And Meredith Kercher also had social media pages, all showing her as warm, family orientated, studious. She seems like she was a very lovely young lady. She was definitely framed as a good girl, and that's crazy too. So the media was definitely problematic. But I feel like Amanda, that was normal college behavior, silly pictures, drinking, all of that. What a shame that turned evidence of character. But let me just take a second before we close out and say our goodbyes. Is for all of you that are listening, and for any of you that are younger and possibly in college, this is why we tell you all the time, watch what you're posting on social media. Not saying that this could ever happen to you, but you know what? You never know. And it's something that could pop up 5, 10 years, right? So all of us parents, you're all nodding your heads going, Adrienne is right. We teach this. Watch what you put on social media because see what happened with Amanda Knox. That's it. Getting off my high horse.
Absolutely, Adrian. The story of the Amanda Knox case is both a tragedy and a cautionary tale. It's a tragedy first and foremost because a young woman, Meredith Kercher, lost her life in a brutal crime, a promising life cut short that can never be restored. It's also a cautionary tale about the pursuit of justice. This case showed how investigations can go awry when guided by preconceived narratives or media frenzy. For years, two other young people lived under the weight of accusations that ultimately proved unfounded, but not before a long, twisting journey through courtrooms and an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved.
This case has left us with many broader lessons. We saw the power and limits of forensic science. Tiny DNA samples that seem like smoking guns, they turned out to be question marks, teaching us that not all lab results are infallible. We saw the impact of media sensationalism, how a catchy nickname and a compelling narrative can sway public opinion and perhaps even judicial attitudes. We also witnessed the extraordinary resilience Meredith's family, who had to endure years and years of legal twists while mourning their daughter. And as we reflect on the saga, we hope that Meredith Kercher is remembered for the person she was beyond the headlines.
Thank you for joining us for this in-depth look at the Amanda Knox case on Debate the News True Crime. If you found the discussion informative or thought-provoking, please subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a review. Your support helps us continue to shine a light on complex cases and have these important conversations.
And as always, we appreciate you, our listeners, for being part of the true crime community. We also really appreciate all of our chatter friends on Chatter Social. Download the app and come in now. Let me just say the quick thank yous. We are so grateful. Heather, we're happy you're here. Mariana, thank you for speaking up. Dora Maria, loved that you were speaking up. Debbie, thank you. Nula Newsy, the Nulu, thank you so much for talking. We're happy, Danielle, you're here. Angie, you guys go back and listen to the Fox Hollow Murders. Angie from Angie's World was our guest host. That was amazing. We're so happy that Angie is here with us. Rebecca, Andy, thank you for speaking up, Andy. Love to hear that. Jonathan, Denise, Gail, Momo, and in the audience, Cammie and Goddess. What a great group. Really love having you all here. Thank you so much. And we'll be back next time with another case, another deep dive into the facts and the controversies. We are debating. I really like the fact that we had some good debates tonight, Joseph. But until then, stay safe, stay curious, and have a great night. Thank you all so much.